meeting. So folks, yeah,
Are we live?
See? I don't know. I think so. I don't know.
It says meeting is now streaming live on custom live streaming service.
So we may be live and people heard my mumbling. I apologize.
It's all good.
Well,
Welcome.
Oh, yes, we're live.
Awesome.
Excellent. Was there a way to put a link to the Zoom chat for the folks who are live on LinkedIn to flip over? Because we were really hoping for this to be a conversation between folks and less of us talking to people, but more of us talking with people, if at all possible.
Yeah, I've just put it in the chat for LinkedIn. So whoever sees that, hopefully they can copy paste it.
Cool.
Fantastic.
And move it over there. Do you want to take off the screen share for a moment so I can introduce you?
Sure.
And
yeah.
Awesome. So here are the two starts today. Let me spotlight you. Well, I can't figure that out. Spotlight, Mike, and where's Erin? So hello. We have, this is DPP office hours. Welcome everybody. As usual, we're making stuff up as we go. We have Mike Brucek and Erin Moran from Evertrue, who have very kindly agreed to join us. They're on a mission related to data and making data work for fundraising shops. And they're going to share their progress so far and invite all of you. We have Andrew, James, who else do we have? Anthony, Kimmy, David. Welcome everybody.
Hi, everybody.
We'll invite you into the conversation, or they'll invite you. So without further ado, Mike and Erin, take it away. It's all yours.
Sure. Well, I'm going to go back to the screen share then and kind of guide us through it. And again, this is really intended to be an active conversation. And it'll be, the less we are talking at people, the better, because no one really wants to hear Erin and I ramble on about something because there's a secret. We're actually not the experts in this subject matter. We are experts in knowing that we need to talk about this, but the actual conversation pieces that were most interesting so far have come from, the folks who are out there every day working to kind of solve this problem in their own shops. And it's those people that I think we are hoping to learn from today. So we are actually the students, and we're kind of approaching this from the perspective of oftentimes in fundraising organizations and shops, you hear non-technical leadership say things like, oh, well, this data's out there. Like, let's just use it. Let's just build this thing. Like, just go get the data. Like it's this magical, push button and get data sort of process. And we all know that that's just not the case. So we kind of approach the conversation from that leadership perspective, and as expected, got the, typical comments back about why it's so hard. And I think today was hopefully just a chance to move that conversation from written form on LinkedIn and DMs and emails to kind of like, let's just talk about all of it so we can share with each other and hopefully connect for the folks who are live on LinkedIn. What was that?
Oh, sorry. No, nothing there. Keep going. Thanks.
Keep going.
I don't want to spend too much time on this slide because I know it is not about us, and it is not about the company we work for, but it might make sense to explain why we're here and why we even stumbled onto this topic in the first place. And it's really short just to say that, Evertrue it kind of brings the software services and people together that kind of unlock the full potential of your donor pyramid. And in that process, we've got a pretty massive data asset, and it's in the higher education space. Hundreds of millions of gift transactions, 30 plus million constituents. Like there's just a lot of data that I'm very fortunate to get to study, and I have it at my disposal to do work with. And when I started to kind of go down that path, we stumbled headlong into this question. We started to do some very practical scoring models for prospects, mostly around who would we want to target for engagement, any donor model of who should we reach out to this week, this month, this quarter should have some element of who is responsive in the first place in it. There's a billion different ways to do it, and that's not what we're here to talk about, the right or wrong ways to do that today, but that is the process. And I ran headfirst into this with a lot of folks saying like, we don't have that data, it's not in our CRM. And we work with CRMs at nonprofits across the board, again, mostly in higher education. So we ran into this thing like, and I had the voice in my head of a leader a fundraising leader who says, well, it's there. Why don't you have it? Like, why don't we have this stuff? And I heard a ton of great feedback. And so I put it out on LinkedIn, this question, why do we kind of suffer through these data gaps, and, what's preventing us from moving forward in these spaces? And this is really a what to expect for today. And I'm not, again, I mentioned it's not about us rambling on, it's more about hearing from other people. So we're going to get to 3 key slides where we'll spend most of the hour talking about the latter 3 bolded points here. We believe there's meaningful data in this stuff that's ignored, but that turned out to be debatable. We heard perspectives on both. So we'll talk about that for a little bit. And again, I'd like to hear from folks more than talk about it, on why they agree or disagree with that. And I'll have some examples to prompt us if we need it. Erin and I took the position that this data is accessible. I used to work at a phonathon vendor, and I knew how to get access to that data there. So like I kind of, if the data is out there, just like the stuff we need, but it's not always served to institutions in a way that they can use it to their greatest advantage. So we'll talk about that. Whether or not it's accessible is debatable, apparently, and I'd love to hear the debate. And also saying that storage shouldn't be a barrier, but man, we've heard a lot of feedback about storage as a barrier, CRM versus not CRM, the process, technical challenges, resources, all these things. Like, people came out of the woodworks to tell us how wrong we were on that, which I love. Like, I don't work on the front lines every day like folks out there, so I'd love to hear more about the challenges of that as well. And I can see David Woodley on here, and I have some quotes planted on here, and I actually lifted your screenshot, your LinkedIn comment, so you get a personal shout out on one of these slides, and it's positive. Otherwise, I would have blacked your name out. So I appreciate your interaction with the content online. So that said, Erin, I don't know if you want to take a quick moment to introduce yourself too, because I know that you were part of our Ever True family in the Solus group down there.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I'm Erin Moran, or Moran, as Lewis calls me, which is technically correct. I will let you know. No, don't be embarrassed, because my husband changed the pronunciation because he got so tired of people saying moron. But it is technically, in Ireland, it is pronounced Moran, and my husband's from Ireland. So you can call me either one, or officially. But yeah, so I'm Erin, and I'm from the Solus group, which was bought last year from by Evertrue, to my great delight. It gave me the opportunity to get to work with some of the most wonderful people I've ever met, and so it's been terrific. Prior to that, prior to starting Solus, which was a fundraising analytics firm, I worked for many, many years in the advancement operations side of the house at DePaul University here in Chicago, where I am. And through that, I got to know a lot of the challenges that kind of exist that we don't talk about. In fact, even as I wrote this article and worked with Mike to kind of push the industry a little bit and say, hey, can we have this conversation about why it is that we're not getting all the data that we maybe deserve and need? At the same time, I was hearing myself from the university sort of operations side saying, yeah, but who has the time to do anything with it? Who's going to listen if we make recommendations based off of it? Basically, I was having this skeptical, challenging conversation inside my own head. So I am definitely prepared to be open-minded in talking with you about sort of what the barriers to this are. But ultimately, what Mike and I are trying to do as a team is work with partners out there who are willing to kind of explore these questions and let us maybe sort of play with their data to see if we can help them find the value in some of these data sources. So that's part of why we're opening this conversation. And anyway, so that's me, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, and this is kind of like the first of the 4 points on the last slide, or just like how did we get to this conversation? And again, I'll move past this and hopefully get to more. And again, if there's folks on LinkedIn Live who want to click over to the actual live discussion, I believe there's a link out there to do so. And please come join us in this setting. So yeah, we started doing some scoring models. Just, you know, I am a former fundraiser, 20 plus years as a frontline fundraiser turned data scientist and analyst through a redirection of my career later in life. So it's kind of fun to have both perspectives. And so the first thing I did with scoring models, look at behavioral data points. What do I have at my disposal from folks to collect, and kind of ran headfirst into these data gaps. And so I just put it out there on LinkedIn. It got a lot of traction. I was pleased to see a conversation start. Erin wrote 2 excellent articles. One was called Thinking Outside the CRM and What is Data Really Worth? And that What is Data Really Worth was on LinkedIn, posted below this a post today, where it's like kind of addresses some of the things we heard that we're going to talk about today. And it was amazing just to hear back from folks who like some people are really passionate about this, and I love it because they're either passionate about the fact that they can't do it and they want to, or that they don't think it should be done at all, or like, oh, this is a non-issue, and just it was all over the map. So that's what led to today. You know, Lewis and I were talking, and it was just seemed like a natural fit for a conversation like this today. And Lewis, I want to pause because, like, is there anything you want to add to this too, as Erin and I set the table for in a lengthy way for 3 big questions?
No, just welcoming everybody. There's kind of a gap, so people are hearing this on LinkedIn with a little bit of a delay, but another invite to join us on Zoom. I had a question for both of you, maybe like from the Slow Joe perspective, is what do you even consider like as a large data gap? I mean, I think we all kind of have a definition in our heads,
That's a great
but
question.
what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I can take that one. It's a matter of perspective, right? So as a data scientist who sits down and knows that I need to build a model with features, or like if you think of it like a tabular Excel sheet, what are all the columns? Like if everybody has a row, what are all the things in all the columns that you know about me and that would help maybe offer predictive value of what I might do or how I might behave in the future? And we all know the classic RFM, and this is where Andrew and I connected for a chat, which was great about this. Like, you know, RFM is great. It serves a lot of basic purposes, but man, we're capable of so much better stuff, especially with the technology out there today that helps a non-technical audience, you know, get further down the line than they used to. You don't have to know how to code necessarily all that well to improve on RFM, but if you can code in a variety of languages, or even one for that matter, you can take it even way further than simple RFM. But to do that, you like, if you're going to bake a delicious meal, you have to have ingredients to do it with. And I did a fun exercise where I was like, I'm going to take the most basic ingredients and just see how predictive it is. Surprise, surprise, it was crap. They didn't have it. You know, you need better ingredients. And so I was like, all right, cool. Let me go look for the better ingredients and see what I can find. And a lot of our higher ed partners didn't have them. And it's like, okay, well, talk to me about the phonathon. You know, like I got early in my career, I worked at a phonathon vendor, and I know that in the back end of these systems, every time someone calls me from the University of Wisconsin or the University of Minnesota, they log that. Like, here's the date, here's who called me, here's the outcome, here's how long they talked. And it was a no-brainer to me, but that why would I, you know, if 2 people got 10 phone calls in the year and they both resulted in a non-gift, those 2 people could be extremely different. What if one person answered 3 different times but got distracted by kids or whatever? They were, you know, they answered, they talked for a minute, like, oh, I gotta go. They took the call the next time when they called back, and they talked for 9 minutes at the end and said no. Versus this person who got 10 phone calls, said no, after 5 seconds, cussed out the caller and slammed the phone down. Like, 2 very different prospects. But if you just give somebody the annual roll-up of these people got called 10 times and said no, which is kind of what most folks are getting, is that aggregated version. You can't break it apart. You can't use it differently at all. And there's just a lot of telling information that's buried a little bit deeper. And so that would be one example of, like, I don't know if you want to call it small data or micro data. Events, emails are another one. Like, I was thrilled when we bought ThankView, because like now that our data set is partnered with ThankView, who sends out video emails to everybody, I can get everything from how many times they emailed, did they open them, how much of the video do they watch? Like, you know, did they watch the whole video, just a quarter of it? Do they stop watching over time? Like, just tons of questions about someone's attention and the attention economy. And I can study that with actual data, and I can just make guesses about it. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking for. I think any modeler, including I loved Emma Hinckley over at BWF, chimed in as well. And Erin and I had a chance to meet with the BWF folks, who were just excellent people who agreed that, like, Yeah, if you can get your hands on this stuff, it's really helpful in building better models.
Awesome. Can you both walk us through a little bit of how people use these models? So, I think we've understood the value of the data and the types of data that should be available, but maybe are hidden, and we're going to talk about it in a sec. But what do people use these, like what do you see as applications out there of these models?
Well, one of the things that I think we're curious about is why we don't see more examples of it, right? So theoretically, other than Emma, who mentioned that from BWF, Emma Hinke is working with her clients to provide things like that. But I'm not having the opportunity to interact with a lot of people who are doing this sort of stuff on the ground. Though, having said that, I do know some of the people on this call, so I'm thinking that there may be people on this call who have done this themselves. But I digress. So the way that I think that people might want to make use of data like this is to see if it might inform things like the likelihood to give, the likelihood to attend events, the likelihood to increase giving, et cetera, et cetera. So those kinds of things that would go into a standard, predictive model for fundraising purposes, but that might be much more sort of colorful and informative than the typical data that you have in your CRM, which, if you think about it, is, just boiled down to the basic facts of transactions and summary data related to interactions. There's not much there in the CRM itself that's usually going to have that kind of granularity of, like, for example, how many times a phone call was made and how long the phone call lasted. So that's my answer. What about you, Mike?
I would actually say, I love the crowd that we have live here. I mean, between Andrew, James, David, Kimmy, you and I haven't met yet, but I mean, would you love to take a stab at it? Because I guarantee we'd all say the same thing. Like, how would you use these models? I'd love to hear from other folks as well, because I know how I would use them, but people are sick of hearing me talk already.
So what I'm really good at is keeping that awkward silence going for a little bit long. So any random thoughts here of models that you're using already? Is everybody using RFM models, for instance, in some form, way, form, or fashion? Andrew's saying maybe. So yeah.
Is everybody using models to try to identify behaviors or predict an outcome of any kind?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's the generic answer. Yeah, thank you.
And that's really what it's all about. Because, like, defining a good, people use this word model. By the way, people use a lot of words. I have a lot of soapboxes. I won't go on all of them today, but like, if I hear people talk about AI or machine learning or use all these fancy words like algorithms to just explain doing basic, telling someone what to do, I'm just going to lose my mind. But it's like, that's kind of what we are, right? You have to have a very specific outcome you're looking to do. And it all starts with a business question. Man, we want more people to attend this event. All right, well, like, let's try and look at past behaviors to figure out who might be the best audience to apply limited resources to. Now, this is the assumption that you have limited resources, right? Which I'm assuming everyone does, especially the smaller the shop, the more limited your resources are. So sometimes a good model or a good, framework for assessing your audience can help you use a small amount of money to have the greatest amount of impact. And that's really what it's all about. And I think our industry is full of a lot of big charges for things like that, when really the more technology progresses and the more skilled our workforce gets, especially in higher ed, and I can't speak to nonprofit in general, but I would like to think the same thing. The more skilled we can get and the better our technology gets, the cheaper it will be to do cost saving efforts like that around modeling, I hope.
I think from my perspective, if I could jump in, we have one of the bigger data gaps that I've seen historically through my experience at a few different universities and colleges is the current preferences of all of our constituents. We have really robust data about what they did when they were attending, And the further we get from that point, the less information we have. They may have been really keyed into, a particular club or a particular, degree program, and they may have switched careers a few times and have completely different preferences now. So building up content preferences around, how they interact with appeals or how they interact with the website, pulling that data back in to use that to drive what asks look like, to drive what segments look like, I think is really important going forward for us. I don't know if anyone has experienced the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that kind of data, especially, how open rates, all kinds of things that we have with email campaigns. I think most organizations, I think, have that kind of data now, but the integration back into the CRM, it's kind of, so the way I've been thinking about it recently, I mean, I could be wrong if somebody else knows more, but there's a whole sort of career path called data engineering that seems to exist more at some companies, where there are roles where people are focused on making sure these sorts of things are working. And it's, can be a full-time job to do these kinds of syncs and enrichments. And there might be some organizations that have somebody in that kind of role, but I'm not aware of who has that. And it kind of leads to an interesting, like day to day, we have to be both modelers and data engineers. And sometimes the data engineering piece can be really time intensive.
Amen to that. And even at a private company, we've lobbied for data engineering resources over the last few years as we grow into that space a little bit more behind the scenes. And, I had to sell it internally, and I'm not going to be shy about that. And I'm grateful that our leadership acknowledged that and saw the value. But yeah, like, how do you pull in data from all these different sources? And there's we can skip to it if we want, but James and Andrew both mentioned that, like, they talk about pulling it in, like, oh, we got to pull it in. I couldn't believe the amount of pushback we got about, like, well, this is dumb. Like, why would you even talk about this? You can't put that kind of stuff in a CRM. And I was kind of like, yeah, like, exactly. Like, I didn't say put it in a CRM. I said, get it, like, and store it somewhere. Because it came on the heels of a conversation with somebody who ditched their phonathon. They said 4 years ago. It's an institution we work with, a public institution, and they ditched their phonathon, and then they were like kind of kicking themselves that they didn't, like, get the data download on the way out the door. And the person said, well, it's 4 years old. And I'm like, it's nothing now. Like, I'd rather have 4-year-old data than nothing. I'd rather have current data than 4-year-old data, but, like, you got to start somewhere, right? And it was like, well, we didn't do it because who wants a phonathon log? And it clutters up. There's a comment on here too that someone said about it cluttering up the database. And it's like, obviously I don't think you should put ledger style data in a CRM as a contact report, but you should have it somewhere. So I'd love to hear people's thoughts with, like, I was hoping somebody from Blackbaud had signed up to attend, and I don't know if they're on or if they're on the Zoom part of it, but I was hoping to get somebody in attendance who could speak to the idea of, like, what would they do? And I know William on the screen here, you can see, had commented on the written back and forth about, like, yeah, like, CRM solutions are great. Here's different ways to do it. And you can read the thread on LinkedIn to get to this point, but eventually it's kind of like, oh yeah, just dumping it into a cheap storage spot's kind of the last resort, but it's also really easy to do. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think we've had all that much trouble. I think what you're showing here, what Erin said, we have the same, I think philosophy. Data storage become very cheap and very easy to access. And whenever anyone asks me in a meeting, should we keep this data or do we need this data? I'm always yes. And the second question is, well, how far back do you want it? And I want it forever. How much do you want? Because it'll get used. And I think there's, that future planning, mentality that a lot of us have, where we will probably likely need this at some point in the future. So just grab it and put it somewhere, and not necessarily CRM, but depending on your shop and who, runs IT, or if that's an IT role, the mandates around a hub and spoke model, which is sort of an old paradigm, but one that sticks in people's mind as, we don't want a lot of different, areas to draw on, to make it more complex to get the data. We want it to be, rather seamless and follow that master data management, idea of the golden record, that it just stays in one, the truth is here and everyone go here. This is where the truth is. Don't, venture out too much. So yeah, it's definitely beneficial to have it. And again, more is better from my perspective.
To your point, to Andrew's point, oh, go ahead, Erin, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say one thing that I think does make a huge difference is just leadership support for some of the decision making here related that has to do with resources. I mean, it's such a minimal amount of money to make some of these decisions, but unfortunately, even that, sometimes I know that depending on where you are and what the sort of management philosophy is around budgetary investment, it can be hard. And what's particularly hard when it comes to arguing for the value of information is that you're storing it sort of on a wish and a prayer, right? Because how can you verify that something is valuable as a data analysis asset until you've analyzed it and demonstrated that something of value came of it? Because of course you can't always prove that something good will. And if you're truly approaching things scientifically, sometimes your analysis will, you'll start with a premise and it won't back up your premise or whatever. So I think I just want to give a shout out to those of you who have been working to kind of collaborate with your leadership and kind of convince them of the merit of doing some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions that may reveal my ignorance. Is this related to the concept of data lakes?
Yeah, there's a ton of buzzwords that that is one of them. I've heard data mesh, and there's I think what most people have is the data swamp, unfortunately, and that's where people just start dumping a bunch of stuff together with no rhyme or reason. They're not, and I keep going back to Andrew's comment, and Brad's on the screen as well. That element of data engineering, there's raw, messy crap, and then there's the place where you use it that you can tap into as a resource. And it's okay to have a mess somewhere. It's like that closet that I know I have 3 of these in my house where I just stuff junk, and it's I don't open that door because it's messy when I open it. But once a year I'll go in there and try to organize it, and I'll pull some stuff out to a space that we actually use and whatever. So there should be a clean space that products and routines are built and tied into, but it's okay to have a messy space as well. And the difference between those two is somebody with data engineering skills or data cleaning skills or data organization skills. And you don't necessarily have to be a data engineer, go to college for this. It's something you can pick up along the way with SQL skills. I'm a fan of the R language because it's very easy to clean data with R's tidyverse. So a data lake, we could look up the definition for it. Data warehouse, same, there are subtle differences in how things are organized and the architecture of what those look like. A lake tends to be a little more granular and more it's just kind of all exists in the same space versus if you think of a shelf with a bunch of bins designed neatly, that's more of a data warehouse. Those bins are designed for a use case. Our annual report runs off of a bin that is created for that use case, whereas the lake is kind of more just the data is all next to each other for uses needed. Is that a fair way? I mean, does anyone agree with me? I'm kind of making this up as I go, but that's my impression of how I would differentiate the two. Cool.
Okay. So my follow-up question is, how do you query that data? So I think part of what people like and what leadership understands in the CRM is that you can pull stuff out of it in a way that they've come to understand now. If it sounds like that closet now, the first thing I'd think is, okay, how is it going to be usable down the line?
we got that question, and it's a nice little side chat here too with the author of this one, and then I crossed their name out because I didn't want to like highlight them as somebody who didn't know or was asking an honest question, and so I'll protect their identity there. But I got that a lot too. It's like, well, what'd you even do with this? Like, you can't put 2 million rows in Excel. I'm like, exactly. You'd never want to use Excel to do this kind of work. But you can do a lot with pretty basic coding skills. And if anyone is out there, I would start with SQL would be my first encouragement, is to learn that language, because that's what'll help you take information from a source and pull it out and make it look kind of like you need to start to put it into Excel in a form that's more manageable. And you might do that 10 times in 10 different ways, and only one of them actually matters. Like, you got to keep playing with it a little bit. You have to have a play environment to query that out, in my opinion. And maybe that's a barrier too. I actually should ask folks on the call too. I take for granted the fact that I work for a company where I have a giant Amazon limitless play space. I can play with 75 million gift transactions in a couple minutes, and then go, this doesn't look right. This isn't really how I want it. Scrap it, and then like reprocess 75 million gift transactions in a different way and play like that. But I don't think a lot of institutions have like a computing environment that even allows that. So is that true? Like, is that assumption true?
Yeah.
James has a thought.
Oh, sorry. I think I'd agree with that. It's definitely, at some places, it's something that someone needs to push for and open the door to that. But yeah, somebody else had a comment.
Yeah, I from our perspective, and I think historically the push has always been for getting the most out of the data, so the greatest breadth of use. So people are starting with, what's covering the descriptive analytics first, and that gets all of the attention. And then diagnostic slides in there second, and then you move into predictive and prescriptive modeling, which, is kind of the last frontier. So there's a lot less effort put toward those things, a lot less personnel, and it requires more expertise. So breadth always wins as far as, the management folks, when they're, asking, what did you build and who used it and how many people used it, and what capacity savings did we achieve by creating this report versus the old report that we had. Even though it's possible with SQL to get in there and answer, the singular question or the predictive singular question, the weight seems to always be on, how much value we're getting out of it from a use perspective from the staff.
Would it be fair to say that a good argument to make to leadership when making this case might be, and I keep going back to phonathon data, I can switch my example, but I'm a little hung up on it, pun intended. The idea would be, they send annual data right now. I think, one of the bigger vendors sends like, here's how many calls they got this year, their results, like the real high level rolled up stuff. And they've built, that's what folks ask for, because that's what they know how to use right away. They can just put that as a line in their contact report because it's just one for the year or something like that, or maybe two for the year. I guess my argument to leadership might be, if I was fighting for resources, that give me the granular level stuff, because from that, I can continue to give you the stuff that covers your basic reporting and feeds a lot of things, but I can also break it apart and use it in more, like experiment on it and research it and play with it to come up with more different. It's more versatile if you have all the details, I guess would be my case, but also kind of maybe say that, yeah, I can continue to do the other stuff too, maybe show some basic use case value adds, maybe. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Not, never limit, for sure. Yeah. Make sure it's available.
How does AI impact the value of this data? I think I sent you an article, Mike, or a quote from an article saying, how funny all those call centers that had been collecting data to train AI for years and didn't know that that's what they were really doing.
Yeah, 100%. I love that article, because I think I made this case 20 years ago when I started working in, on the phonathon side of things, that like, why do we not capture the more of the conversation? Like, we capture the software generated points, but like the fact that someone couldn't talk to you because their 3-year-old had to go to ballet lessons. Like, they have a 3-year-old. That 3-year-old is currently taking ballet. It's more rich than the fact that it was like a call that didn't result in anything. I was just baffled why we weren't saving that. And the answers were just like we're talking about today. Like, I actually had one at a very large public institution. I had a president, when they started experimenting, was like, yeah, like I had a really forward thinking executive director, Manuel Giving, was like, yes, let's start putting that there. So we tested it. Like, let's start, they was using Excel, like we're talking raw prototype, which I love. I wish more institutions thought with the entrepreneurial mentality that we are fortunate to have, where it's like iterate and test a bunch of things that aren't meant to scale, test something just to see, just get something basic stood up just to test the value of it. And this dude was like, yeah, let's do it. And the president called him, and he was terrified because he's like, this president said, listen, like, I was going through this database and someone called the cousin of a major donor and the contact report had a spelling error in it. And like, yeah, we can't have students entering stuff in our database because the spelling is wrong. And I'm like, oh my God, like, talk about a very short-sighted complaint. And it was baffling. We had to shut the whole thing down. And I was like, oh my God. And then, the company gets a wind of that. And it's like, well, let's abandon the idea of doing that because one president didn't like a spelling error. And I wish, and that was 20 years ago. So like, imagine had we been collecting all that rich data between then and now that we can use it, and it'd be killer. But to your question, Louis, I'm sorry I went off on a tangent there, but like, where does the technology help us most? I think it's in telling us how to use it or helping people learn how to use it. Because as I was putting this together, I deleted slides that I put in here about people who don't know how to get it. Oh, we don't have someone on staff that can harvest this information. I asked, and I'm just going to do it because everyone's talking about it, but it is helpful. I just typed it into ChatGPT. I said, write me code in SQL that will pull from an Amazon, any database and deposit into an Amazon thing. And it replied with something that was 90% of the way there. Like, you had to replace the login information and stuff, but it was 100%. And then I'm like, all right, write this in Python. And it just changed it into the Python language. Again, you can't just like copy and paste and run, but like, it's like mostly there. I was like, and I'm like, can you automate this to run and only update the differences nightly? And it did it. Like, and it said, you'll need a Docker. And it was awesome because it was like, you'll need a Docker instance for this on Amazon. Here's how you write a doc. And it was just like, this is great. And I asked it to write me an API to pull it out there. And it did that too, like really accurately. I was shocked. But that's where the time saver is going to come in. Like, could I have done all that? Sure. But I would have needed to block out a few days to like play with the code, test and whatnot. But dude, that was 10 minutes of ChatGPTing that saved me days of coding. It was just great. So I think that's where we're going to see help with this in the future.
Incidentally, ChatGPT's capabilities is a whole other chat that we should all have, perhaps over beers. Because for those of us who are a little skittish about stuff like that absolutely gives me the willies, but that it's that good.
Well, speaking of beverages, Erin and I are both here in Chicago, as you can tell my glorious hotel background here. We're in Chicago for Case Drive, so if anyone's down here, come find us this week. We'd love to continue the conversation in person.
Yeah, please.
That will be great. I'll connect you with the Alma-based team, folks. We're going to be there.
That'd be great.
That's going to be great. So for those who we haven't heard from, Kimmy, Emily, Daniel, totally understood if you have stuff going on. We know it's not always possible, but open invite to say hi and share your perspective. What is your shop doing around data and modeling and finding good data? So Erin and Mike, it's almost like you need data detectives, no? Like hunting for data and get it. I mean, my experience from higher ed, there's always some entrepreneurial department that set up an Access database 10 years ago. And there's a ton of stuff in there.
Thanks to Erin introduced me to somebody, and like our ultimate goal is to find literally anyone who will hit these 3 points or is willing to experiment with these 3 points. And we are willing to leverage all of the powerful tools that we have to their benefit to help. Like Erin introduced me to somebody at a very large public institution last week I went back to this slide, I think it's here, where I said not a single respondent has reported on having an active solution. This person did respond with an invitation to partner on everything from, I don't know much about this and neither does my staff. I've got somebody who may or may not want additional resources there to talk with the vendors as we ask for this information, because this slide is something we haven't talked about yet, but a lot of people haven't even asked for it yet. So they don't really know what they're dealing with. They don't know how big it is. They don't know what the hassle would be, because it's one step in a chain that they're not even really thinking about yet. So she's like, would you join us for those vendor conversations? Like, sure. Like literally I will take any and all, invitations to partner on things, whether you're a customer or not, doesn't matter to me. I'm just here to I'm more concerned about the industry on this front than anything else.
So what happens in other industries? Is there large pressure from the clients to, why does that end up happening in a HubSpot, right? Where you can get your data in and out pretty easily. But then it doesn't happen so much in ours.
It's a great question.
Erin, I feel like you and I have talked about this before, and I would love you to take first crack at that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I don't remember what my hot take was at the time, but I will say that I do think that one thing that is, from my perspective, influencing a lot of this stuff has to do with bandwidth and staffing. We have these conversations sort of in an assumption of an environment where there's hands to take the data and do something with it. And right now we're in a sector that's being trimmed pretty dramatically. And so I think to some degree, let's just put it this way, were it my decision, my fear would be, if I were leading a group that was potentially able to take the data and analyze it, my fear would be that we would sort of call attention to ourselves as being capable of handling the bandwidth of that work on a regular basis, when we in fact are too shorthanded to do it. Now, my other take on that, which I said to Mike, was that, that's where partners like us come in, because especially right now, I mean, I don't know if everybody has clued to the fact that Mike Brucek is a data scientist who's basically offering to help people for free. So it's actually a really great, that's not something that's going to be available all the time. So I would definitely take advantage of that. But that's where people like us can come in, because we're working on the for-profit side to partner with nonprofits to help them sort of share the lift on this kind of thing. And I think once we get some traction and once we are able to kind of demonstrate value, that sort of thing will snowball, and it'll go from being something that people have to ask for to being an expectation.
Hopefully.
I've got another soapbox thing that I won't go off too much on, but it's this push and pull of the nonprofit world. And I see it, and again, my whole career has been in higher ed fundraising, so I can't speak for other branches of it, but it's probably similar, I'm assuming. The push and pull between, we need to protect our data security-wise, which is true. Yes, you must protect your data, but it is useless if you don't use it. Like it is like, yes. And I think of like that movie, the 4-year-old version, with like all the toys on the shelf in the box. It's like, those toys look fun, but I can't ever use them for the benefit because I must protect them. It's like, at what point, I'll skip the soapbox. I'll move right to the point where I say, I think our industry is designed for protection and isolation more than it is for partnering with, like Erin said, at some point you are going to need, institutions are going to need to be more nimble, prepared, and comfortable partnering with other people outside the organization, because the idea that you can do it yourself better is true. I'll say it right now out loud. It is true. You know your data better than anyone else in the world, but you're an uphill battle. You're facing an uphill battle against an environment where advancement services and IT is getting cut left and right. Like there's like, you know, like the number of prospect researchers is down. Like whenever there's staffing shortages, like advancement services folks they're like the most overworked people I've ever met. They're fighting 18 fires every day. And like to just throw on this really helpful idea that would enable fundraisers in the future, it's going to take a backseat to the fire that's like raging behind them right now. Like it's never going to change. So as human resources go down, the gap should be and probably will be filled with vendors. But if you're not nimble enough to say, like, and we get this all the time, right? Leaders, oh, this product is awesome. I just talked to a salesperson. It's going to solve all of our problems in this area. And then they're like, you know, just go ahead and do that implementation, and we'll turn it on in like a month. Like we could just turn it on, right? Nope. Like they're not ready to like partner and take advantage of that opportunity. And the idea is right, but the setup is wrong, and we just need to get to a better place as an industry in that element too. It's no one's fault. It's not the advancement service people's fault. It's not a blame finger pointing game. It is just a huge opportunity to start the conversation and get better.
Yeah, I would say there's a, I mean, I think that's essential. I mean, I think from a framing perspective to senior leadership, the donor profile, for lack of a better word, is changing significantly. And we're getting farther and farther away from the churn of, participation and small donors, and trying to move, small donors into medium donors, into large donors, like wholesale, where relationships are becoming far more critical in developing, large future, donors. The younger potential donors today are very different than our older donors. And, they give in very different ways, and they have a lot more opportunity to give to a lot of different organizations. It's not really set up for, the way historical donors used to give, which was to these large institutions, So I think it's essential to be able to have those either outside or inside or hybrid groups that are developing closer and closer and closer, relational models and to develop the baseline of what the donors look like in excruciating detail with more and more data, so that you can target much, much closer and much, much better, so that you are drawing those folks out. I think the days of, volume over or quantity over quality are certainly going away.
Amen. It's changing faster too. Like you got to keep up with changes, and every time something new comes along, if you're not set up to be a nimble, if you don't have a nimble architecture supporting your data, you're lost.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that people, I'm finding every leader I speak with is somewhere on the continuum of, understanding with respect to this, because the world has changed so much in the last however many years. But I think there's at some point when people are in this business, the sudden realization that the more precise we can be with the data, the more predictive we can be with the data, the more time we save of the people on the front end, the more money we save. So, I was talking to my old boss from many years ago, who was the VP when I was campaign director for the campaign at DePaul, and she credited technology for, we did very well in our campaign, and she credited technology for that. She said, my strategy was, I knew I couldn't afford to hire the number of development officers that I needed. So I invested in data and data analysts to make sure that the people I had on the development side had the best information they could, so their time was the least squandered. And that she did not illuminate me to that strategy at the beginning of the campaign, but it worked. It really worked. So it's, I think some people, get that now, and some people are going to have to get it later, but that's basically the terrain we're working toward, because otherwise it's like you need armies of people to raise the money for these billion-dollar campaigns.
Our friend Jeff Martin did an excellent study a few years ago about the ROI on a dollar invested in various roles on campus. And like, for every dollar invested in annual giving professional, for every dollar invested in a major gift officer, for every dollar invested in an advancement services professional. And if I'm recalling that correctly, again, you can look it up. Jeff Martin is the author of that one. It was an advancement services professional got the most bang for their buck, because like, I firmly believe that it's okay to take a step back, invest in a good advancement services, data analyst, data scientist, and then invest in fundraisers who can be served with ready to go, like who can enable an army of fundraisers down the road. Like I'm a firm believer in that, but it's a hard sell because that ROI, that's another thing. Why does the ROI of like an advancement services or data person get done on the annual basis, but like a major gift officer is allowed a 3-year runway to show value? Like what if an advancement services data professional had a 3-year runway to show value? I wish that should be the case. Like, I would love that. And I'm not sure why that's the norm, but my suitcase is full of soapboxes over here. I'm just going to put that one away.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. This is a very interesting conversation, at least to me. And it's great to see all the perspectives. Mike and Erin, do we want to float the idea of getting together like this for conversation more regularly?
Yeah, I would love that. And I'd love, you and I have talked about, is there a DPP sort of like outlet for analytics, data-minded folks who want to kind of just nerd out a little bit on, different approaches, different tactics. And I'm more than willing to help lend my time and in organization to get that organized, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I do want to end too with, we're kind of wrapping up here with one call to action, because I don't like being a part of any presentation ever where it's just kind of all talk and it's like you leave it and you're like, oh, that was awesome. And it's like, well, you don't know where to get started. If there's one simple thing that I hope everybody can do tomorrow, or carve out literally 5 minutes to do, either test exporting this data from a current platform you use, any platform, or write an email to a vendor. Start with the phonathon. That's where it's going to change the most. Once those things are gone, they're gone. Get your phonathon data before they're gone, and get it. Like, just get it in hand. And it doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be updated. You don't have to build a system for everything. Just see what you can do as a first baby step, and then trust me, things will go from there.
That's wonderful.
We may start like a petition.org type of thing that we're up to Mike.
Yeah.
Nice.
Make a phone call for your phone data is what I say. And I say that with love, because my former colleagues at RNL, I spoke to them a couple of weeks ago and told them I was going to say this today. And I wanted to make sure they were prepared to get that information. I wouldn't want to put them in hot water, because there's excellent people there, and they're still friends. So I know that they responded warmly with that's definitely something they could do to help out. So for those of you using RNL, they can get you what you need.
Yeah, and oh, sorry, I just wanted to ask Mike if you wouldn't mind showing the last slide here.
Oh, yeah.
Because
we had that.
yeah, we have our contact information here. And like Mike mentioned earlier, we're going to be hanging out at Drive. We'll be at the Evertrue booth when we're not in sessions, and we would love to grab time with you if you're going to be there. If not, and if you'd like to have a chat with us, please, by all means, you're always welcome to book an appointment with us. I put our Calendly link here. This book's time with the two of us for 30 minutes. So if you have, for example, if you try to follow Mike's call to action and you run into struggles and would like some help or some troubleshooting advice, or if you'd like to talk about what to do next if you do get the data, go ahead and click on that link and put some time on our calendar. We would love to talk with you further about it.
I'm not an instructor, but if anyone's looking to get started in coding in different languages, I know a few pretty well. Happy to give resources on where I'd start there as well too.
That's great. That's very generous of both of you. So reach out to Mike and Erin on LinkedIn, or if you have the memory of an elephant, memorize that Calendly link and type it immediately after this meeting.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I guess that's probably not. Wait, I can help with that. I'll drop it into the chat.
There you go.
There
Very
you
helpful.
go. Much better. Sorry.
Oh,
Thank you.
No, oh my goodness, no. So, and give us I think everybody, well, some people who are on LinkedIn may not get it, but give us a thumbs up if you want to do a DPP group around analytics, that type of thing. If you think you'd find value in it, like a once a month meetup.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
And yeah, we'll keep learning together. Thanks everybody for joining today, DPP Office Hours. We'll look forward to seeing you next. Erin or Mike, any closing words for us?
Just a thanks.
Yeah, I want to thank all you for coming. It was a fun time, and thank you so much, Louis, for having us. It was
Awesome.
It was great.
Huge pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
You take care.
Bye.